There's a moment in Alaskan Bush People where Billy Brown looks into the endless white nothingness of Alaska and calmly explains that modern society is broken.
We do and live how we choose to live. Let's go, time to wake up.
That people have forgotten how to live. That the only way forward is backward. And for a second, you believe him. Because the snow looks real, the wind sounds right, and for a moment, the family feels real. 7 kids. 1 mother, 1 domineering patriarch, all clinging together like survival itself is a personality trait.
Removed from mainstream America.
We learned a long time ago that we don't really need the outside world.
No phones, no rules, no cities, just love, loyalty, and the bush. That was the promise. Discovery didn't just sell a TV show, they sold a fantasy, a comforting one. That if everything collapses, if society rots from the inside, you can grab your family, disappear into the wilderness, and somehow come out.
It's a different planet. Get back to the cabin, everybody. You all right? There's no laws. There's nobody going to protect.
Morally cleaner on the other side. And people wanted to believe it, by the millions. But here's the uncomfortable part. The fantasy only works if you never ask practical questions, like where the money comes from, or why the off-grid family keeps interacting with courts, hospitals, hotels, and production crews. Or why a show about rejecting modern life somehow needed 14 seasons of modern television infrastructure to exist.
Where temperatures can drop to 50 below zero and up to 49 feet of snow can fall per year.
Because the moment reality starts peeking through, not the snow, not the wolves, but paperwork, contracts, and human flaws, the illusion cracks. And Alaskan Bush People wasn't destroyed by the wilderness. It wasn't destroyed by critics. It wasn't even destroyed by time. It was destroyed by the very thing it tried to escape. Real life. Before it became a meme, before it became a punchline, before it became a legal problem, Alaskan Bush People actually made a strange kind of sense.
Yeah. An early snowfall.
Winter caught us. Yep. Is it frozen?
Yep.
It premiered in 2014, right in the middle of that cultural moment where everyone suddenly hated modern life. Smartphones were ruining attention spans, cities were too loud, politics felt fake, and Instagram was already exhausting. So when Discovery introduced a family claiming they'd opted out completely, no electricity, no society, no rules, it felt like an escape hatch. At the center of it all was Billy Brown, a self-mythologizing patriarch with a beard, a philosophy, and a voice that always sounded like he was halfway through a campfire sermon. He talked about freedom, loyalty, and living the right way.
And for the next 48 hours, life is peaceful.
It's pretty cool.
His kids weren't just children. They were a wolf pack, not a family, a brand before anyone called it that. Discovery didn't invent this out of nowhere. Billy had been trying to sell this story for years. He'd written about it, pitched it, repackaged it. When reality TV started craving authentic wilderness, his timing finally hit, and the audience showed up in a big way.
Got it.
You expect anything less?
By 2015, the show was pulling millions of viewers and topping cable ratings. People loved the chaos, the accents, the nicknames. Bear became a walking soundboard of reckless enthusiasm. The kids felt unscripted, unpolished, almost feral in a way that read as honesty instead of concern. It wasn't slick like other reality shows. It felt messy, earnest, almost pure.
Fall back. Get back to the cabin.
And for a while, viewers weren't watching because they cared if it was 100% real. They were watching because it felt real enough, because it offered something comforting, the idea that you could opt out, reject the system, and somehow win. Looking back, that's the most important part. Alaskan Bush People.
To me, in every situation, protecting the family, that's the first thing on my mind, always.
Didn't succeed because it was true. It succeeded because people desperately wanted it to be. The funny thing is, the cracks didn't show up all at once. They crept in the way they always do, quietly, in moments you barely registered, in details that felt off but not wrong enough to question yet, because the fantasy was still doing its job. It still felt warm.
It was a big decision, and now they're struggling to keep it together.
At first, it was just a feeling you couldn't quite name. Billy's speeches started looping. The same ideas, the same phrasing, delivered with the confidence of someone who'd been telling this story for years. The kids stopped feeling unpredictable and started feeling positioned. Bear wasn't reckless anymore. He was leaning into recklessness. You didn't think, this is fake. You thought, this feels rehearsed. Then the illusion started losing its edges. People online began pointing out things you hadn't wanted to notice. Not big revelations, practical ones. The kind that ruin vibes. Remote didn't really mean remote.
Together as a family.
Just give me a light bump, open road in front of us, no big deal.
All right, let me know when you're ready to cut loose, son.
The cabin wasn't swallowed by wilderness. Locals mentioned seeing the family around town. The off-grid people somehow always had clean clothes, access to doctors, and camera setups that suggested planning, not survival. Still, you could live with that. Reality TV is fake adjacent by design. That's the trade-off. Nobody expects purity. They just don't want to feel openly manipulated. And then the manipulation became obvious.
We all secured?
We're good to go.
Buoys, everything up?
Yeah, fenders are up.
As a Bush family,
Because this wasn't just staged drama anymore. It was dishonesty baked into the structure of the show. Storylines fell apart under even light scrutiny. Danger that was never officially reported. Threats with no paper trail. Emergencies that existed only because tension was required that week. Somewhere along the way, exaggeration tipped into fabrication. And once that line is crossed, the internet notices. Not immediately, but inevitably.
It's hard to start over again, but I think it's going to be realized with how much better it's going to be.
People started rewatching with different eyes. Episodes got dissected. Facebook groups formed not out of hate, but curiosity. Reddit threads turned forensic. Timelines were compared, locations mapped, accents analyzed, not because viewers wanted to destroy the Browns, but because the show invited scrutiny and couldn't survive it. The show wasn't collapsing yet, but trust was bleeding out.
You see little cove right there?
Is that where we're headed?
Yeah.
they quickly locate an empty island.
Then came the fraud. And this wasn't a narrative problem. It was a moral one. It's one thing to fake a wolf encounter or heighten a storm. It's another thing entirely to get caught lying to the government while presenting yourself as above the system. The irony landed hard. The family that rejected modern institutions had allegedly been taking money from one, illegally, repeatedly, for years. You could almost feel the audience disconnect. Not in anger, in quiet embarrassment, the kind that makes you realize you defended something that didn't deserve defending, the kind that makes you stop recommending a show without making a statement about it. Discovery's response didn't help. They downplayed it, softened it, tried to keep the fantasy intact as if nothing fundamental had changed, but you can't unring that bell. Once viewers realized the outsiders were still playing the system and losing, the moral high ground vanished. After that, the tone shifted permanently.
Yeah.
But not everything is perfect. This area also has the highest density of black bears.
Billy's speeches stopped sounding inspiring and started sounding defensive. The Wolfpack rhetoric felt less like unity and more like authority. The family dynamic, once chaotic in a charming way, now felt managed, controlled, like closeness was being performed because the format required it. And then the cracks reached something darker. Matt vanished from the show. At first, the explanation was gentle. Rehab, struggles, growth. Reality TV loves a redemption arc. It gives mess a shape, but this one never resolved. Matt didn't return. And the silence around him felt heavier than any storyline. When the allegations surfaced years later, the shift was immediate. What had once been entertaining stopped being harmless, because now it was clear the show hadn't just exaggerated reality. It kept airing while allegations were quietly building off camera. The realization hit hard. This wasn't a family shielded by isolation. It was a family exposed by fame. At that point, the cracks weren't cracks anymore, they were fractures. Even longtime fans felt drained, not outraged, exhausted. Every season felt heavier, less adventurous, more like crisis management wrapped in inspirational music. Even real tragedies, illness, fires, death, landed differently.
We're on this island, so we have to be careful.
Keep an eye out behind us.
Yeah, I'm watching.
Not because they weren't real, but because the show had spent years burning through credibility. And then Billy died. And that should have been the end. Because Billy wasn't just the face of the show, he was its myth maker, the one who turned chaos into narrative. Without him, the fantasy didn't wobble. It folded inward. What followed wasn't a revival, it was momentum without direction. Episodes aired, seasons existed, but nobody was really watching with the show anymore. They were watching past it, waiting for it to stop, waiting for Discovery to quietly move on without acknowledging what had gone wrong.
The area has the most rainfall in Alaska, at 153 inches of rain a year.
Instead, the collapse dragged on. More arrests, more family disputes, more social media posts trying to explain things that shouldn't need explaining. The younger siblings, once symbols of innocence, now airing conflicts publicly like so many reality TV families before them. Eventually, the question changed. You stopped asking, "Is this real?" and started asking, "Why is this still happening?" That's the peak of the collapse. Not a scandal, not a cancellation, not a dramatic finale, just the slow realization that something once comforting had turned into something you couldn't justify anymore, even as background noise. And the saddest part, none of this was caused by the wilderness. It was caused by cameras, money, pressure, and the lie that you can turn isolation into entertainment without it eventually turning inward. By the time Alaskan Bush People reached its later seasons, it wasn't failing because of one scandal, or one arrest, or one exposed lie. It was failing because the entire premise had rotted from the inside.
The best one I've seen, all the other ones seem sealed off. This guy might still be open all the way. We're talking like 500 feet.
The show was built on the idea that isolation makes people better, stronger, more honest, less corrupted by society. But what it actually showed, unintentionally and over time, was the opposite. Isolation didn't purify anything. It just delayed the damage until cameras and money dragged it into the open. And here's the thing, nobody likes to admit, especially not television networks. You can't sell opting out of society while being fully dependent on it. You can't reject systems while cashing checks from them. You can't preach freedom while operating inside contracts, lawyers, schedules, and network notes. That contradiction was always there. Early on, it was easy to ignore. You didn't want to see it. Later, it became impossible to unsee. The show also stopped knowing what it was supposed to be. It wasn't survival anymore. The danger felt managed. It wasn't family drama, because the real drama was clearly happening somewhere the cameras weren't allowed to go. And it wasn't inspirational, because inspiration requires trust, and trust doesn't survive this many asterisks.
Father Billy's ultimate mission is to return to the basics of family and fun.
So what was left? A format on autopilot. Episodes existed because episodes were expected. Emotional beats were hit because the structure demanded them. Tragedies were framed as lessons. Growth was implied instead of shown. Every season tried to convince you this was still about resilience when it was obviously about maintenance. Not growth, maintenance. Keeping the machine running, keeping people paid, keeping the brand alive long enough to justify the next renewal. And without Billy, the machine had no center. He wasn't just the patriarch, he was the narrative glue, the one who could turn chaos into mythology. Without him, the show didn't collapse dramatically. It just drifted like a campfire after everyone's gone to bed. Still warm, still smoking, but clearly done. Meanwhile, the world changed. Audiences got better at spotting fake authenticity. Social media made it impossible to control the narrative for more than 5 minutes. Reality TV lost its innocence. People stopped wanting fantasies about disappearing and started asking harder questions about power, control, and who benefits when simple living becomes content.
Brother Noah unveils a project he hopes will restore a Brown family tradition.
And Alaskan Bush People didn't have an answer. Because the truth was uncomfortable. The show didn't fail despite the system. It failed because of it. Because reality TV takes real people, puts them under sustained pressure, and then pretends the fallout is just part of the journey. By the end, the Browns weren't symbols of freedom anymore. They were cautionary examples of what happens when identity becomes content, when family becomes storyline, when privacy is traded for longevity. It wasn't bad because it was fake, it was bad because it didn't know when to stop. Here's the uncomfortable part. For a while, Alaskan Bush People almost worked. Not as truth, not as a documentary, but as a feeling. It sold the idea that you could walk away from the noise, take your family with you, and rebuild meaning from scratch.
You know, the longer I stay down here, the spookier this gets. I know.
No algorithms, no cities, just people, purpose, and a very dramatic landscape. And that fantasy mattered. Because the Browns didn't feel polished. They felt like people who opted out before opting out became branding. But fantasies are fragile. They need trust, they need restraint, and they need someone willing to stop. This one didn't. What started as a survival myth turned into a cautionary tale about turning family, belief, and identity into long-running content. Once a fantasy becomes a franchise, it stops protecting the people inside it. By the end, it wasn't about freedom anymore. It was about endurance, not surviving the wild, surviving the consequences. So the question isn't whether the Browns were fake or real. It's simpler. What does it say about us? That we keep turning escape into entertainment, and then act surprised when it breaks the people who try to live inside it. Anyway, like the video, subscribe, and tell us which reality TV family should have stayed off-grid a little longer.